Lord of the Rings is one of the most beloved film franchises ever, and made billions of dollars. These movies were reviewed well by critics and audiences alike. On the other hand, the Sharknado movies are often pointed to as the peak of bad movies. Low budget, with some bad critic reception and no awards attention. At the end of the day, none of this matters. To me, Sharknado clears Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings might have legacy on its side, it might have fan base on its side, and the technical filmmaking, but there is one thing Sharknado will forever hold above it. That's the heart. This is the first video of franchise battles. It feels a little cheap to be making this video in one way. I have two main ideas here. I don't love the Lord of the Rings movies, and hate the fans even more, and I unapologetically love Sharknado. I could make two separate videos about the franchises, but I think comparing them brings certain points to light and puts into perspective my thoughts on them. If this video was simply Sharknado is good, there would be no perspective to that. Sending a statement like that into the world is meaningless unless I back it up with other context. Also at the top, I feel the need to say this video is at most 10% sarcasm. There is a small point here or there that I exaggerated a little, but I genuinely believe what I'm saying. I first watched the Sharknado movies my freshman year of college. Me and some friends decided to take one day and watch all of them. 6 movies in one day. That's 521 minutes a movie, or 8 hours and 41 minutes a movie. And I wasn't sick of it by the end. There was enough variety and entertainment to keep me watching. It wasn't miserable, but instead I couldn't wait to start the next one when one finished. I don't regret doing it all in one day. It made for a really fun experience. I knew I should watch the Lord of the Rings movies, and I set aside a day to do it. I was excited. That's 558 minutes a movie, 9 hours and 18 minutes a movie, 37 more minutes than the entirety of Sharknado. And these movies have zero reason to be that long. They needlessly drag and regurgitate the same points and action scenes over and over. I just couldn't watch them all in one day. It was unbearable. I had to stop after 2 towers due to fatigue from the same thing. Long movies either need stuff to happen or for nothingness to be entertaining. I was just bored by Sam, Frodo, and Gollum, by the human guys I refused to learn the names of. There were so many characters, none of them meant anything. I just didn't care about any individual character in this. The idea of the extended cuts of these movies are insulting. Dragging stuff out even more is insane. If the theatrical cuts of these movies are too bloated, I can't imagine throwing even more time on them. Just make it a TV show at that point. Another problem I have with Lord of the Rings is the cast, crew, and fans think it's some peak achievement of art. Fans of the movie feel a sense of superiority because they like this franchise. Look down on people who don't like it or like other franchises. The people making the Lord of the Rings movies thought they were making the best art mankind had produced, leading to a self-masturbatory wank fest. So much of this spends time basking in their so-called greatness. But at the end of the day, these movies are still slop. It's still a franchise film that uses IP for financial gain. You are allowed to like slop. But what irritates me is pretending it's not. Pretending it's art house cinema. Thinking it's elevated from other franchises. Lord of the Rings does the same stuff as the MCU or Transformers. There's the Hobbit movies, a spin-off show, an animated movie. There have been talks about a remake that's been going on for a while. It's an IP they milk. The absolute refusal to admit that drives me crazy. These fans look down on and criticize MCU fanboys, but they're exactly the same. There is no difference between the two, which is fine. I just preferred if you own it and were less of a jerk about it. On the other hand, Sharknado knows exactly what it is. I'd argue it's less slop-like than Lord of the Rings. There was a vision, a single 6-movie arc, and once they finished the story, there was no resurrecting corpses to make more money. No constant milking of the well-known characters and visuals for more money down the line. They put an end to the series at its natural conclusion. Sharknado did briefly appear in another production from the Asylum, but this was a low-budget celebration of the studio's legacy, and not really made to be watched by the masses. Sharknado is not an IP, it's a series of movies. I think it means something artistically that they don't keep going back to the same old well. They evolve and change and haven't made more movies. It's so refreshing for a series to not be so self-serious. These movies know the idea is silly and leans into it. They're having fun instead of fumbling through uptight storytelling. Leaning into the wacky fun side of things make these movies awesome. I laughed the hardest I ever have when I gathered clips for these movies. Delightfully silly and proud of it, just there to have an awesome time. My next point is the action in Sharknado is better across the board. Lord of the Rings does have some high points in terms of action, particularly the later stuff in Two Towers, but a lot of the fighting fails to be exciting. Large armies clashing, nameless soldiers getting mowed down, characters we know never getting in real fights. A big scale doesn't equal cool action, unfortunately, and they just repeat a lot of the same elements of fight scenes over and over multiple times throughout the franchise. Then with Sharknado, you certainly have messier camera work and effects, but the actual action is so much cooler. It's more personal, making it resonate more, and unique. In the third movie, Finn fights a shark in outer space with a lightsaber chainsaw. That's groundbreaking creative brilliance. It's unique action that you don't see in any other kind of movie. The opportunities that come from a concept like this are endless, and they execute greatly on so many of them, leaning into the cheese and going all in. A shark and T-Rex fight. It's just so sick. The Sharknado is a better villain than Saruman. Yep, I said it. Saruman has always bothered me because he just doesn't do anything. He's a vague, thinly fleshed out evil being. There are moments they try to characterize him, but it never works. Then, the Sharknado is just a force of nature. They aren't fighting this deep-seated evil being, but instead the environment. The good old man versus nature. Neither the Sharknado nor Saruman have fleshed out motivations, but Sharknado doesn't pretend to have it, making it so much more palatable. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the representation of women in these movies. You have probably seen this clip before.
Where is Mama?
This is the only time two women talk to each other in the entire trilogy of Lord of the Rings. It's a little telling and beyond funny that half of that conversation is a woman being shushed. Women talking to each other gets 2 seconds out of 33,000, and half of that is the movie telling the woman to be quiet. Do you want to say here and argue that a trilogy that has such a disinterest and lack of care for women is one of the greatest ever? Go ahead. Then we have the Sharknados. Fun fact, every movie in this series passes the Bechdel test. They hit this very basic requirement 6 out of 6 times, while Lord of the Rings strikes out. It's astonishingly easy for a movie to pass the test, and Lord of the Rings can't manage. But I have to admit, the Bechdel test is flawed and doesn't truly sum up how a movie represents women sometimes, so we can take this to the smell test, and Sharknado clears. The women representation in Lord of the Rings is so minimal and to the side. There's a complete lack of women representation that sours me, while Sharknado has a strong presence of women. Nova, Claudia, and April all have strong character moments and focus is put on them throughout the movies. By the 5th and 6th movie, April is practically the main character of these. The Sharknados weren't written by an old-fashioned guy who hates women. That's gotta be a point in their column. I want to quickly go through a few bullet points I have from some of these movies, and I couldn't fit them in any other part of the video. Sharknado has a top 3 wrestler ever, Kurt Angle. Each movie had one wrestler in it. It was a fun little treat to find him each time. Mark Cuban is the president in Sharknado 3. That's funny. I have to re-mention the outer space lightsaber chainsaw fight in the 3rd, one of the best movie scenes ever. I really like the ends in Lord of the Rings. Merry and Pippin riding the one guy is maybe my favorite part of the franchise. Return of the King having so many endings is bullshit and is annoying. It's a bug, not a feature. Stop treating it like one. Now I want to talk about the quality of the individual movies. Sharknado has higher highs, but also a lower low. Every franchise has to have that one stain on it. Sharknado 4 is the Mission Impossible 2 of Sharknados, except for the fact that it's just straight up bad. It's a boring movie, but even if it's worse than Return of the King, it takes up half the time, so in a way, it might be better. Here are my rankings of the 6 Sharknados, 3 Lord of the Rings, and I'm also throwing in War of Rohirrim just because. 10th, Sharknado 4, 9th, Return of the King, 8th, Sharknado 5,
Number 7, Fellowship of the Ring,
6th, Sharknado 6, 5, Two Towers, 4, War of Rohirrim, 3, Sharknado 2, 2, Sharknado 1, and 1, Sharknado 3. Averaging out the placements, the original trilogy gets a 7, and the Sharknados get a 4.66, brought down quite a bit by the 4th movie being so bad. It's clear across the board that Sharknado is a better, more consistent franchise than Lord of the Rings. And I'm not even taking into account the Hobbit movies, which people hate. I haven't seen them, but if I did, there was a good chance the gap would widen even more. Society, the internet, and even my own personal friends have peddled a narrative that one of these franchises is the peak of creativity while the other is bankrupt. Propaganda has drawn out, brainwashing the masses into liking one of these franchises. And I'm here to put an end to the stream of non-thinkers and fight for true art. This franchise battle ends with a decisive victory for Sharknado. At the end of the day, the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy is pointless anyway. They could have just taken the Eagles. If you have thoughts about the videos, drop them in the comments. I love to talk about movies and would love to have the conversation with you down there. Subscribe and like too. I might do future franchise battles. I'd love to hear what matchups you would like to see. Thanks for watching.